Hello and welcome to the I Om podcast. Today's episode is about healing, which comes from the root word to become whole, in the same root word as well as holy. And in this episode, I'm going to discuss my I Om holistic medicine model, which has great influence from shamanic and traditional Chinese medicine, as well as the teachings of Paul Chek, indigenous medicine, shamanic medicine, and a number of other sources. One of the hallmarks of my system is that it's a system based on self-empowerment. And what this means is, in some sense, the aim is to not create reliance. It's to encourage individuals to connect with the true source of healing, which is the foundation of becoming whole, connecting to one's totality, to pull from that source the capacity to heal oneself. Now, within the model, there is the empowerment process of encouraging individuals to take on practices such as breathwork and qigong, as well as to take control of their life force energy in all dimensions so that they can rise to their potential. But also within the system, there is healing that can be received. So let me sketch out a little bit about my model, and then some of the foundational understandings that I have about how I see an individual and how imbalances are created and how we can heal them. So this episode is really for anyone who's curious about traditional Chinese medicine, especially the medical qigong aspects of energy healing. And even if you don't have any major imbalances that you're facing, another individual in your life may. And the work here is not just to deal with imbalances, and I'll highlight this as I get more into my system, because a lot of the pointings that I have, the orientations that I encourage people to take up, is to direct their mind towards their dream, towards what is most representative of their deepest soul's yearning or their deepest desire, if you don't want to use the word soul, for what you want to do in this life. And the recognition here is that when we pull from that source, we have a motivation, a momentum of energy that allows us to make the changes in our life and that are necessary for our healing. And without the fire from our passion, most people don't make those changes. And I would go so far as to say that the majority of imbalances are caused by people's choices due to lifestyle, and their lifestyle is one that is not optimal for the health of their body, which has caused the imbalance due to some disconnect from their spirit and their spiritual path, this path of pursuing their dreams. And because of that, as a result of that, they have taken on behaviors and actions and choices that have led them down a road which has caused the imbalance to manifest. But I'll get more into that soon enough. So a little bit about my model. Now, it's an expansive model, and not everyone I work with I go into this great depth with. But in general, as I mentioned, my pointing is towards an individual's dream as the primary orientation, because it's the driving engine of our life. When we have a sufficiently big dream, which means that it's not just for us, it's a mission in life. It's going to in some way help one's family, the community, and the earth. And a dream this big requires that we be at our potential, that we pull together our highest consciousness. Because if we have a dream that in some way affects all of those spheres of reality, it's important to have an awareness lifted enough, like an eagle flies above, to see all these things. And in order to have a dream of that caliber, it asks a lot of us, of our actions and how we live in this life. So getting people to orient towards their dream is really important. And the path, the journey towards the dream is really vital, because as soon as an individual orients towards their dream, one of the first things that'll come up for most people is what's in the way. What limiting beliefs are in the way? I don't have enough money, energy, time, skill, etc., etc. And these are belief systems, and in my understanding, our belief systems are part of what is creating our reality. So my encouragement is for individuals, if they want to work with me, they must be willing to take full and radical responsibility for what they are consciously and unconsciously creating with their life. This recognition takes one out of childish archetypes of being a victim, of being a poor little me in this universe. And it asks that we take responsibility as a co-creator, as an individual who holds within them the power that creates universes, the power that is creating their universe, and that their beliefs, many of which are inherited conditioning, affect an individual's perception, as do one's thoughts, which attract their feelings, which relate to the physical functioning of the body systems. So right there, I've alluded to the process of creation that is happening with every breath and blink, as we are in a eternally renewing creation. Everything comes from the spiritual, the undifferentiated source of all things. It has many names. But from that vibration, we move through layers of mind, of thought, into feeling, into the physical. And this is really key to understand, because this is the biology of belief. How our thoughts, our innermost thoughts that are most repeated, which are given the most energy, consciously or subconsciously, are what are running our system. It's quite amazing to hear information like the subconscious, where I don't remember the numbers here, but it runs about 90%, maybe 95, maybe 99% of the processing of your nervous system, meaning that when you walk around, you think that you are directing your consciousness, but so much of what you are perceiving, what your nervous system is orienting towards, what it is noticing, what has become aware of, the thoughts that you are thinking, are due to your conditioning. Now, this is different for different individuals, because the higher consciousness and the more light you've shone in the subconscious, and the more inner work that you've done, the more control you have of the choices in your life. There's more liberation available in each moment. But still, so much of the processing happens at a subconscious level, because there's so much work. Why would you want to do all that? You don't want to beat your heart. You want to focus on the things that you want to focus on. You don't want to digest your food. You don't want to have to process every single bite of information as it comes in and how it relates to everything else. So we automate. We automate because it's most efficient. And that's how our system works. So a lot of this automated processing, we don't realize, and we don't realize just how much our thoughts affect that. And we don't realize the thoughts we repeatedly think, how deeply they're going into our mind, and many of us aren't aware of where they came from. And if we are, it's kind of like an individual who's aware of smoking and they know it's bad for them, but they don't quit. So there's some awareness of the conditioning of what's happening and how the mind is processing. And yet, not a lot of responsibility or capability to rewire the fundamental software, so to speak, of the mind, body, spirit complex. So if an individual wants to heal, as I mentioned, they must become whole. They must take this radical responsibility of their belief systems, their mind, and their energy and body. And this is really important. This is really important to understand, because this is our key to freedom. When you take yourself into the mind that you are a conscious creator of your reality, and you can change the fundamental script, you can rewire, so to speak, or repattern the very DNA that is encoding the proteins that is creating your physical body. We know on some level that we're doing this. That's why we go to the gym. For those of us who go to the gym and we build our body in the way that we want it. So too with our emotions and mind. So too with the very fabric of reality. And there are masters who have been able to crack the code of universal law to a degree that's inconceivable. The mastery that they have had over not only their physical system, but the entire system as it relates to the whole, like computer programming, hacking into the basic matrix of all. And through this, becoming as one with the gods. So when we take this fundamental position as a co-creator with the force of all things, we cause a fundamental shift away from the ego and its identification, which is a cause of all kinds of neuroses, because it is in itself a limiting thought, and it is a kind of prison in that way. If one is knowing themselves only as the ego and not as their wholeness. In Chinese medicine, there's 4 main branches. There's herbal medicine, working with herbs. There's body work. This is like Tui Na massage and other practices. There's medical qigong. And there's acupuncture. In my system, I have herbology, but I don't study Chinese herbs. I work more in the realm of plant medicines. I don't practice acupuncture. I replace that section of the system with breath practices, such as conscious connected breathing. I do practice medical qigong and yoga, so I put those together as a beautiful way to move the body, work with the mind, clear energy and emotions for healing, for optimization, for rejuvenation. And I am a body worker, though I don't know Tui Na massage, but I work in various other body systems. And this is a system that I can work with individuals. I can guide them in breathwork sessions. I can guide them in yoga classes. I can do body work for them. But I also teach it as a system that individuals can learn for themselves. I empower individuals to take on being their own doctor, being their own physiotherapist, being their own massage therapist. Since I started massaging my body every day, I've gotten to know my system so well, and I've healed so many imbalances, and I've been able to, with greater efficiency, move emotion through my system, because moving emotion is all about feeling it. And if you want to feel the body, touch the body. You want to touch the body, breathe into the body, and learn to breathe into your depth through the layers of muscle, skin, and bone, and deeper into the very energy of your body. Because the recognition here in the Chinese medical system and in many indigenous systems and the yogic system, etc., is that we don't just live in the physical. The emotional body is a certain vibratory frequency that is of a higher frequency. It's less dense than the dense physical matter, and still less dense is thought, and still less dense is the mind of all thing, which is source energy, which is a ubiquitous energy that is like the background that everything is being created on, like a piece of paper. And all other vibrations are on top of it. Now there's more to what we could speak to. When I say source, we could talk about the Tao and the primordial yin and yang, and how the dark and the light and their infinite manifestations, from the one to the two, from the two to the three, and the three to the many. But we don't need to go too deep into that. There's a simple recognition, and if you hear it and you know it, then it has resonance already in you. And it's not something that I want individuals to believe when I say it. This is why we have the practices of Qigong and breath, so individuals can have an actual experience, a direct experience, which is the source of truth. So that these aren't just words that the mind can intellectually understand. The individuals can actually have an intercourse with the source of all things. And from that direct experience, they will understand themselves as light, as vibration. And they will understand that they can change anything at the level of the physical with their mind, and use their mind to heal the body. Because all things come from the fundamental energy of source. All things come from the mind before the body. And as I mentioned, the universe is eternally dying and being reborn in cycles of creation, maintenance, and destruction, in each moment shifting. So in order for an imbalance to manifest in the physical, say a tumor, say a cancer, it needs to be sustained at some level in the mind. It requires a certain energy to sustain that imbalance. Chinese use the word imbalance a lot more than disease, and I like that, because imbalance and balance, it's like yin and yang. For me, maybe it's just that it feels different, and that feeling I feel is actually quite important, because saying you have an imbalance for me doesn't strike me as death sentence, but saying you have a disease carries a lot more heaviness and weight. Maybe that's just a personal thing. Maybe that's just me projecting that. But I do find the word imbalance to be a little less harsh. Because remember, our thoughts and our feelings matter. And if someone tells you you have cancer, and you take that as a death sentence, and you think it's a death sentence, and maybe they tell you have 6 months to live, they're putting a lot of energy behind those thoughts. And if you pick up on that energy and you also give energy to that, then you're building a current towards that. And the mind is creating the body, and that's influencing the physical system. Now there's many other influences to the system, right? The food we take in, the air we breathe, the love we receive, our capacity to move towards our dream. Maybe we do have some thoughts are out of alignment with that, but we have many others that are in alignment with that. So there's this kind of tug of war between balance and imbalance that, of course, that we know is going on, right? This is us being healthy and getting little illnesses, little viruses. This is part of life. We have these forces, positive and negative, and we're teetering back and forth depending on our alignment, depending on our centeredness, depending on our resilience and capacity to stay balanced and aligned in this life. So we have this, you can think of it as like a energetic blueprint that exists at all times at a much more subtle level. And in this blueprint, you have the scaffolding that your body has been built upon. For example, like when your cells first started to develop and form the fetus when you were being born, they had an energetic grid work to go off of. This was your energy body that was created before your physical body, and your body grew to fit this blueprint. And now you're an adult and you grow less physically than you first did in those first month, 2 months, 2 years, which is when you have the most amount of physical growth. But you're still growing. Your cells are still coming into being and dying. If you can't tell, I did a big scream, and it's kind of like made my voice a little bit hoarse, and occasionally I can feel it like drop out, and I don't know, it feels nice. There's like a depth that I got into after that scream, but there's some like trepidation or something in the chords. Maybe you pick up on that. So this energetic blueprinting is behind all things, and you can think of it as having layers. And if you have that tumor as an example, there's a part of that energy body that has, we could call it turbulent or chaotic chi, depending on what kind of malformation is there. And it's due to a limiting belief structure, a thought form that's attracting negativity. And there's a few other things that could be entangled in that. But the understanding here is we manifest the physical imbalance, the tumor, for example, here, because of a negative belief pattern. Like, how do we get at this then? Maybe that would be a more practical way of explaining this. Say an individual has a tumor. We would look at where it's in the body, and this would relate to the chakras, which all relate to certain zones in the body. So there's 6 chakras that relate to the body. 1 is above the body, of the 7 main chakras, of course. And there's 6 body zones, and of your body, there's various regions, and your meridians run through certain regions. So we'd want to locate how this lines up with the energy body. And we want to locate what you know about the imbalance. When did it first appear? What else was going on in your life? Because that's important. Because many things are happening underneath the surface. Your body is constantly getting cancers, and it's dealing with them. Most cancers don't manifest. It takes quite a bit of, let's call it imbalance, to actually have cancer manifest, or any disease condition, for it to come to the surface that way. So if we're talking about tumor, once again, to stay on a example, it's already been there in the energy body. And the thing is, your body knows at some level, maybe not in your conscious mind, but some level, the information is there. And of course, we can go to doctors and they can give us tests, and there are many pathways that I completely support in that way of Western and Eastern medicine. And there's also this pathway which isn't as talked about as much, which is your body knows, and developing a relationship with the imbalance and the area and the energy is a beautiful tool for your self-healing, right? Because at the level of source energy, which you are, you can heal it. It's possible. All things are possible. I never tell somebody what they can and cannot do because I don't know. I don't want to put a limitation on the source of all things. So any healing is possible. And your body knows not only what's going on, but also how to heal it. And of course, there's other things entangled in our imbalances, such as we could talk about karmic implications or things that we've decided on a higher level to manifest for a particular learning. So at that level, one could express that maybe not all disease conditions are meant to be healed, and maybe they're meant to run their course, and that's the most advantageous way of learning those lessons. And we could always say something like, well, there were certain destiny lines which have a momentum behind them, but we always have free will and we can change those pathways and patterns. But that's a larger discussion that I'm not going to get into here. So we have this tumor that I've been aforementioning, and we're looking at its history of when it manifested, and maybe there was a divorce and there's been some anger that's been held onto and suppressed. And that anger is the emotion, but what's the belief? The belief might have been the unfairness of the divorce for X, Y, and Z reason. And because that individual is still holding that belief, even if they remove that tumor, it's quite common that tumors come back. And the Chinese medical understanding of this is that it may be because the underlying energy, the root cause of that tumor wasn't addressed. And that was the belief systems that are attracting the emotion. The emotion is blocking up the system in some way, and there would often be contributing factors from other organ systems, other emotions, because we rarely just experience anger. Often, in this example in my mind, I would think that there would be anger as well as sadness, as well as fear, as well as worry. But there's often a primary emotion, and there's often a primary belief structure, and yes, there could be other belief systems entangled in that. And because of that belief system, we would call that a blockage. We would call that a blockage, and that blockage would prevent the free flow of energy through the system. The free flow of energy is a representation of source pouring energy through the body as when we were born. Unless we have any early childhood imbalances, our breath runs perfectly through the system, a representation of clarity of emotion and mind. But at the subtle energy body level, at the chakras and the main nadis and meridians, these energetic lines can get blocked due to these limiting beliefs and the attracted thought forms. The thought form is when we think thoughts repeatedly. They have a stickiness, like an energy. They are taken on like an entity. And certain individuals maintain thought forms, negative thought forms, and they cloud the auric system, the energy body around us. And you may be able to, if you're psychically inclined, to see these or pick up on them in various ways. Some of us can just feel other people's negative emotion, but we may actually be able to tap into the thought forms and the negative belief structures that they're dealing with. This is part of medical Qigong training, is developing first the inner sensitivity for oneself and what our limiting beliefs are and what our thought forms are and the stories that we're living by. And to the degree we're sensitive to our own, so too we can understand others, because it's a vibrational thing. We know it within ourselves, so we can recognize it in others, and that's how we meet them there. This is why in my system I teach the medical Qigong as part of an individual's healing, because it's a system to know thyself at all levels, from your highest source to your most incarnate self, personality, as well as to know yourself as the earth and stars, which without getting into too long of a conversation about Qigong here, Qigong isn't just about knowing your body and energy. It's also about connecting to the fundamental forces above and below of heaven and earth. As it's a shamanic practice, the upper and lower worlds are integrated into it. And this is part of the realization of who we are in our wholeness. Because beyond our personality, beyond the ego, we are the stars. This isn't an intellectual understanding. There are meditations, practices, and processes which can enable an individual to experience the stars as their own body, to receive information from the stars as you receive information from your mind. For what are the stars in the sky but an extension of your mind, which has no border, as it intercourses with the great mind of God? So too the consciousness of earth. Yes, on some level we are her children, like separate cells in a great being, but on another level we are the earth. This is the expansion of consciousness that is made possible when we do the healing work with medical Qigong, with plant medicines, with breath work, with connecting to the true source of life. And from that, we find healing. Now, there's many ways of healing. I talked a little bit about working with belief structures. One way we can kind of scaffold this, we can build a little bit of structure on it, is that you can think of top-down and bottoms-up healing. Now, top-down would be mind down to body. And then bottoms-up would be body up to mind. And this is the recognition here that we can go the top-down route, which I've been talking about. If we have imbalances in our body, we can get at the underlying energetics to get at the root cause. But we can also affect the mind through the body. For example, a bottoms-up practice that I so love is ecstatic dance. You can see how top-down processing mind to body can get a little bit mental. It can be a little disembodied, and it can take a little bit to integrate and bring down the information, because it's like some people recognize, hey, I'm in a bad mood. I recognize the belief here is that I don't have enough money. Okay, I'm going to shift my mind to the understanding that I am abundant. I have everything I need when I need it. But there might not be a lot of weight or momentum behind the energy of that thought. And the negative thought of I don't have enough can have a lot of momentum behind it. It can be hard to make that shift. Now, there's other practices and processes you can do to enhance that top-down process. But simply making that orientation shift towards the belief system that we want to align with, that's enough. At some level, what we can do after that is move the body. Now, yoga and other practices, of course, I've already talked a little bit about. It's Qigong and yoga are part of the system. But ecstatic dance is an excellent one, because if it's held in a good space and the encouragements are there, the invitations, the understanding, you move your body into ecstasy, into a state beyond the self. And the idea here is to move so freely without mind that you're not judging your thoughts. You're not judging the way you dance. You're not even, in some sense, consciously dancing. You are conscious. It's not unconsciously dancing. You're moving towards a kind of super conscious where you're moving your body, but you're also being moved. The intelligence of the body is taking a greater stage, like how an animal moves. There's a grace that develops, or maybe not a grace, depending on your ecstatic dance, but there's something which I'm not expressing that greatly, but there's something that awakens. And there's a certain point this often happens, at least for me, when I feel my mind fall away. And what's that beautiful adage? there is no dance, there is just a dancer, or something along those lines. You understand my drift? Hello, anybody there? I trust you do. So there's a point at which the separate self can fall away, and this unified wholeness that is your wholeness can find itself through expression. And this is a bottoms up healing. The body is doing and enacting what it needs to go through in terms of process, in terms of movement, to express, to release, to find wholeness. And this can shift the mind. So too with breathwork practices. Some individuals come to see me and they may not have an understanding of what the belief systems that are in their way are. And simply by doing the breathwork practice, their system realigns. Why does it do this? There's many ways I could come at this one, but my pointing here is that our breath is so closely related to the source of life. It is the source of life coming from the unmanifest to the manifest. It is the giver of life. The process that I've talked about as source incarnates through mind and emotion and body. That's coming in the ebb and pulse of the breath. And many of the imbalances that we have are due to our mind and the information and energy that we encounter in life. And part of that information and energy is from the foods that we eat. Because all the food that we eat has DNA, it has energy. And when we focus on the breath, especially in a fasted state, we're taking in pure prana, pure chi, pure. It's the closest thing to light we can breathe in. And it has an intelligence. It has an intelligence, and this is imbued in the system. That intelligence not only guides the mind and the intellect, and it connects you with the deepest part of you, which knows what you need when you need it, but it also imbues this intelligence into the system, which helps to reorganize the cells. It helps with the healing. It helps with this rewiring of these limiting beliefs. And you don't need to go through the mental process. Actually, the aim in breath work is to go beyond mind, go beyond body and mind in some sense, and be in the realm of the spiritual. This is the true union with breath that is available with certain breath techniques. Not all breath techniques are going to take you there, and not all individuals will be able to go there in perhaps their first session, perhaps not. But that is what happens through the process of breath work. And this is, once again, a practice I guide individuals on, and I empower them to build their own practice. And when you are connected with the source of life in this way, you should know this. You should know this because it's important. And it's hard to know unless you've done it. But if we go back to early childhood, most of us have not received techniques, tools, and the necessary information to understand ourselves. At a very young age, we had difficult emotions, and we didn't know how to self-soothe. So instead of feeling those emotions, because we weren't given the space, we didn't have the teachings, we sought to numb or distract or find things outside of ourselves that could give us some sense of ease. And what most people don't realize is that most of their life is the result of actually running away from what they've been feeling. I went through this, and my whole life fell apart because my whole life was built upon running away from my emotions and feelings. All my habits and behaviors, and some persisted, but they took on a new form. For example, I haven't worked with cannabis recently because I've been on dieta and working with ayahuasca a lot in the last few years, but I go on and off a little bit. But that was something from my past. And well, not that every time I used it, it was out of unconsciousness with a poor intention of avoidance, but a lot of it was. And the practice didn't fall away completely, though it did for a time, but it became invigorated with intention. And for a period, especially when I was revitalizing my relationship, I was very careful. I guess I still am careful, I should say. Pardon me. I still am careful not to work with that medicine if I'm not already feeling good. I don't work with a lot of medicines unless I'm already feeling good, because I feel like that's the base work that is important for me to do so that I can actually do the deep work with the medicines. It's like I know how to take care of stressors, negative emotion. That's my responsibility before I even show up in a ceremony, to take care of myself in that way. And of course, there is sometimes a ceremony can be a great aid, and it's not a complete rule for myself, and I'm not projecting it as a rule for you, but this is one of the practices that I evolved over the years to help me to use in a conscious way, because it can be a slippery slope, especially with the sticky icky lady. But this is not a conversation about that. That's a large conversation that I feel is a beautiful one to have, because of the prevalence of the use of the sticky icky lady and all her beauty and all the things that come with her. Back to the topic at hand, my friends. So top down and bottoms up healing, that's a scaffolding there, and we can work with our breath. There's so many ways to heal. It's amazing, actually. There's singing, there's dancing, there's telling stories. That about sums it up, actually. Those are the main ones. Oh yeah, and sex. But I'm celibate right now, so I can't think about that. So in my system, as I mentioned, yoga and qigong. I want to talk a little bit more about qigong because it's a very mysterious art. There's thousands of schools. There's 3 main branches. There's martial qigong, which is about power in the application, particularly of martial arts, but power in many ways, mostly of the jing, of the physical, of the essence of the system. There's medical qigong, which I'm most specialized in. And these are specific forms and ways of practicing and breathing that the intention is to bring about balance in the body. The kind of process that is quite prominent in most medical qigong is purge, tonify, and regulate. So this is a general structure. We want to release negative, turbulent, stagnant energy from the system. We want to tonify, which means to add in good energy, revitalize. And then regulate, to bring balance and harmony, so that everything flows in their perfect balance of yin and yang. So the practice, for people who don't know anything about qigong, most people are familiar with tai chi. Tai chi is a slow moving art. It could be considered a qigong, although many people would get their hackles up for me saying that. Qigong just means energy skill, and there are energy skills involved in tai chi, so maybe I'll just clarify that. But tai chi is a spiritual system, but it's also a soft martial form. Soft meaning it's more of an internal art. The focus is more on internal development rather than external, which means it's in many ways an inferior external martial art to most others. You won't find many Tai Chi masters coming out and knocking people out in an MMA kind of scene. It's just not an art that's built in that way, and it doesn't try to do that. Well, some individuals try to do that, and they usually embarrass themselves, but that's another story for another day. So we have Tai Chi, and most people are familiar with that slow movement, and Qigong has some of that slow moving. Typically, you're not moving around, you're more stationary, typically, not always. But the intention is really key. As I mentioned, that's a soft martial form, whereas medical Qigong, the are to do things like stretch meridian lines or to guide energy into certain organs. to create blood flow or compressions, to stretch out certain energy through certain breathing practices in the dantian or into other parts of the body to nourish them, to cultivate energy. And from the fundamental energy of qi is many things. It's kind of an actually a really difficult thing to explain, but I'm just gonna go with it. I know it's some people, but at a fundamental level, it is energy, and it's kind of an icky, sticky way of saying it because of how much misunderstanding that can create. But we can build this fundamental energy that's more closely related to source, that fundamental subtle energy, than it is to the physical in some sense. And because of that subtle energetic property, it's kind of like a pluripotent stem cell, which means a stem cell that can grow into any other cell in the body. It has a malleability, and that where it is focused in the kidney, there's an intelligence there that the cells will begin to balance themselves in the if there's illness or imbalance or a growth or whatever it is in the body, mental constituents of what is necessary to bring about balance, because it's happening on an energetic level, right? This is why we deal with yin and yang and the 5 elements in qigong, because this is what we're balancing. Because if you have an imbalance at the level of energy, it's either too yin or too yang, right? It's either too hot, too yang, too cool, too yin. It's either a growth, too yang, too excessive, or there's a deficiency, too yin, not enough. And there might be an imbalance, and this gets into 5 element theory, which I'm not going to go into too deep of an explanation, but the understanding here is that we have a body that is made of 5 fundamental elements. And in the Chinese medical system, those are wood, metal, earth, water, and fire. And we can have imbalances among these. And just like we would balance yin and yang, like if it's too yang excess, we would give it yin. And there's ways in which the fundamental elements interact with one another. For example, fire is cooled by water. And we can utilize these elements through energy to bring about balance to the body. Now, this might seem a little bit out there if you're hearing this and most of your understanding is built upon a Western medical model of science, because there's not really an understanding or an exploration that's been done in our Western medical system that talks about elemental reality. But it's found throughout most indigenous cultures. There's a Tibetan medicine wheel. They use different elements. There's the yogic understanding, which is found in Ayurveda and the yogic sciences. And there's countless indigenous cultures who have 4 elements and 5 elements. Doesn't so much matter that these systems line up. It's that they're complete systems, because they're reflective of understandings that grow out of certain regions in the world. For example, this is all related to medicine wheels, and different parts of the world are going to have different medicine wheel. For example, you don't have a bear in the medicine wheel in the Chinese culture because, well, they do have bears there, but they're not as prominent as the bears out here. And I feel like I'm just going to abort this part of the conversation because it's getting into something that's way too vast, and I don't think it's necessary to go in too much detail here. So I'm going to leave my point there, that there are many systems, and they have a very beautiful and systematic understanding of the cosmos both inner and outer realities. And when you compare them, nope, not going to go there. So we have the 5 elements, and we can balance them through the Qigong practice. How do you do that? Because they're fundamental energies. Don't think of them as fire, as in there's fire in the body. It's the quality of energy that fire rises. It has a certain quality. And so does wood and how it grows, and metal. So that's a more comprehensible, I would say, understanding. Now, when you begin to practice Qigong, you begin to come against your fundamental beliefs. Because, for example, when I first started learning this, my teacher would ask me to do things with energy that weren't in my belief system. Meaning, I grew up not working with energy in this way. And if I did when I was young, I had forgotten how to do it. So when an individual tells me that I can use distance healing and affect somebody's energy field just with my intention, after going through just a short induction into tapping into this energy, it was very triggering to have that information in my face, because I don't want to be crazy. I don't want to tell people that I can do something that I can't. I don't want to think that I'm doing something and be all imagination. I don't want to trick people and myself into saying that I've done something or I'm healing them when I'm not. So it's very triggering. It was very triggering for me to be put in that position. And though I was open, I had to work with my mind, and my mind can be very vicious, and it can think many negative things. And when this would happen, I would often get angry as I was pushing up against the fundamental underpinnings of my reality. And Qigong does this. It puts us up against what we think is possible. And the only way to get past those blockages, the only way I got past those blockages, was to go beyond the mind, to allow myself to be open, especially in a safe space where everybody was in agreement of what was happening there. And to be able to see, to play with the energy, to not be so serious about it, which allowed me to shift my understanding and have direct experiences. Those direct experiences were unaccountable. I could not account for them with my old belief systems, so those belief systems had to fall. They didn't fall immediately, but there was cracks, and enough water came through that the levee broke. Is that a proper saying? I don't think I've ever said that before. I don't know what a levee is. I'm assuming it's something related to a dam. So this is what happens, not if you're going on necessarily the path that I went on as a Qigong energy healer, but just working with Qi will put people up against their fundamental beliefs. And even if they're open to these beliefs, as I mentioned, having direct experience causes the levee to break. You feel me? Levee holders out there, hold your levee strong. So this is so important, because having that direct experience is something that confirms your connection to fundamental energy. And it doesn't mean you need to believe in God. Doesn't mean anything beyond what that experience was, however it came to you. But it is like a doorway. It is a doorway to you understanding how energy creates matter and how your mind creates your body. And the more experiences an individual has where they break that down and where they can regularly, consciously, and deliberately work with the fundamental substance of reality, then they can begin to become a more powerful and conscious creator of their mind, their body, and their life energies. Now, I also work with the 7 chakra system as a scaffolding to our conditioning, where we hold many beliefs, but also as a fundamental system, as a reality of how energy moves through manifestation and creation in your embodied reality through 7 spinal centers. Now, these centers are energetic spiralings or vortexes, and they relate to things on mental, emotional, and physical levels. I've talked about the chakras many times, and this isn't going to be a full exploration. I'm really just going to name a common association associated with each of them. The first is related to money, tribe, and earth. The second, sex, God, or the Tao, or the source of all things, because how you relate to God is how you relate to all things. If you have an understanding that God is unconditionally loving, the source of all things, making all things possible, then you'll have that kind of approach to life. If you think God is wrathful, then watch out. That's the life you're living. So it's important to understand our conditioning around these most vital centers, not just because of the belief systems, because it's a fundamental way that energy. This is not just a model that I have of health and healing. It's also a spiritual system, and integrated within my Aya Om holistic alignment coaching. Done well to explain some of the fundamental underpinnings of our energetic reality and how our thoughts and beliefs create our perceptions. They create the matrix around us. The most important part of my process, as I've alluded to, is the empowerment of the individual to be connected with their divinity, which is the true source of healing. All else something down the line which will cause us to come back to source. We got to resource ourselves with the true source of healing. So how do I actually work with individuals? So I have 2 main branches. Alignment coaching. Now, I talked a little bit about how the dream and the orientation towards a dream is the most important part. I do include some of that, depending on who I'm working with, in my holistic medicine model, but that's more the holistic coaching sphere. That's more for individuals who want to walk this path of self-empowerment and integrate the system at a greater level. Most of the individuals I work with optimize their health. They're often receiving breath work, and I'm teaching them Qigong practices, and they're integrating them into their lives. Now, individuals who want to walk the holistic alignment coaching system go through my 8-limb process, and it's a much more expanded the systems that are all part woven into my system. And depending on, once again, on the level and commitment of an individual, they may still be doing a lot of the breath work, yoga and qigong, but they'll be adopting more of a comprehensive alignment, so that they're looking at all the 7 chakras and looking at all these dimensions of their life, so that they can call into harmony who they are, their true nature, not the conditioned self, but to write the script of their life in accordance with divine, to working with these spiritual systems, working with the breath to revitalize the consciousness and intelligence and orientations of one's mind, thoughts, words, actions, so that their behaviors are in alignment with Dharma, in alignment with one's highest purpose for giving their authentic gifts in this life. As I mentioned, the cornerstones of my holistic medicine system are breath practices such as yoga and qigong, herb work, which could be dieta work or plant medicine work, and body work. I teach individuals medical qigong. Oh, I forgot to talk about spiritual qigong. We're not going to get there though. And martial qigong practices. I teach various styles of yoga asana for aligning the system, for aligning the mind, for clearing emotion. Within my 8-limb coaching system, I work with orientation towards your dreams, balancing the fundamental forces of yin and yang, balancing our relationship with earth and sky, calling into harmony the 4 directions, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, calling into balance the 5 elements, the 5 negative emotion, working with the 5 yin organs, balancing organ systems, healing, cleansing, purifying. You know the principles, right? Purge, tonify, and balance. Working with the 6 fundamental zones in the body as they relate to the 7 chakras. And of course, working with the 7 chakras and the 8-limb structuring of 8 limbs of yoga from Patanjali, and the 8 directions of gratitude to seal it all in, to maintain in a positive, regulated, and receptive state. When we are aligned, when our mind is aligned with our dreams and our purpose, we are then co-creating with the universe. We are moving from a place of wholeness. We can give our love from that place. We can serve from that place. This is our highest offering, to be connected to the source of life and allow it to flow through us as a clear channel, so that our words, thoughts, our actions are serving of the all. And in this way, we will find ourselves in the perfect place, having everything we need when we need it, out of limitation and scarcity, with the capacity to give our authentic gifts to the universe. If we have a gift to give, there is someone there to receive it. And in that, we will find our sacred purpose. And we will know and experience ourselves as the stars, and be one with the earth that we walk upon, and one with all beings, serving our role. And from that, we will find the highest level of healing. Aya Om.